So Returnal has a lot of secrets and cool things you can collect to make your character way more powerful so that you can get ready for the challenges that are ahead. And in this video, I want to cover some of the secrets as well as the more important tips and tricks that you should know as you're going through the levels, getting ready for higher challenges, and more important, if you're also playing around that rebirth mechanic that will keep you back quite a little bit. You're going to constantly die but also improve, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to become better every single time. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Let's get started with the adrenaline system that you should put a big focus on very early on in the game because of the huge amount of benefits that you get from it. More on that in just a little bit, but essentially think of the adrenaline system as kind of like the kill counter of this game, as in the more enemies you kill, the more it's going to increase your adrenaline level. So every 3 enemies that are killed will raise your adrenaline level by 1 up to the maximum of level 5. Now each of these levels will provide a certain combat benefit, as I've said. At the first level you get enhanced overload, which means that it's going to be way easier for you to reload your weapons because it increases the overload bar. Second one is going to be enhanced vision that lets you see enemies behind cover or objects. Third level is enhanced melee, which reduces the cooldown of your melee, but the last 2 ones are even more important, with level 4 providing enhanced proficiency, which makes it much easier to gain proficiency at a much faster rate, and finally enhanced obolite collection, which increases the radius at which you can collect these resources. The catch here is that if you get hit even by 1 attack, your entire adrenaline gets reset, so you have to build it all the way up. Now there are some shield consumables in the game that can prevent that, but they are pretty rare and you don't always find them, which brings me to the second big tip on the list, and that is dodge through enemy attacks and not away from them. The reason is very simple. Celine actually has iframes baked into her dodge, so when you dodge for a split second during it, you are actually immune to any incoming type of damage. So just to give you a couple of scenarios, when there's enemies with different attack patterns where their bullets or projectiles don't travel at the same speed or travel one behind another, if you dodge left or right or even more so in the back, you still risk of getting hit by the bullets that are still traveling behind the first one, and the same goes with left and right. But if you actually pass through them with a dodge, you're just done with them, they are behind you and you don't have to worry about them anymore. So pretty simple, and by the way, you can use this same trick in exploration when, for example, you might find something like an important item hidden behind a bunch of lasers. You can do the same, dodge through that, and you will be immune to any of that damage. This brings us to the third tip, and that's going to be about integrity and how to gain extra lives, because there's no save mechanic in this game, bar a few mechanics here and there, but you can save your progress. Even if you close the game, you essentially have to restart the cycle all over again. First, let's take a look at your integrity bar, which is essentially that green bar in the bottom left corner of the screen. This is essentially your HP, and by default you don't really have too much of it, especially since enemies can deal a lot of damage to it anyway, but it can be upgraded, and the best way to do so and the easiest is by using something called Silphium Resin. Now this resin is something that you can see on the ground with a green color and also on the main map with a green plus sign. You should always collect these because these will increase the maximum HP that your character can have. Now here is the thing about this: whenever you get a resin, it's going to fill one of the white bars, one of the 3 white bars right next to your HP bar. When all of these 3 white bars are filled up, it's going to increase your HP maximum by a certain amount, between 10 to 15%, give or take, and you will definitely want to collect as many of these as possible. Look for the green stuff, get it, upgrade your HP because it's going to help you survive for longer in the higher challenges and levels. This also brings us to number 4 on the list, and that is how to get extra lives. As I've said, you don't really have a way to permanently save point in a certain part of the map, because if you die or reset it, you essentially go all the way back at the start. But there's a couple of ways in which you can come back to life. Now the first one is going to be through these astronaut figurines and other similar toy artifacts. For the most part, you can get these from either 20th century house that you can find in the first level. Of course, you will need a key, but that key is only provided at certain points in the main story, at least from my knowledge. The upside is that you can't lose that key, so you can always go back to that house and also get the astronaut figurine. The second one is going to be also from the fabricators. You can also find these astronaut figurines from fabricators. It happened to me, and it costs about 250 to 300 obolites to actually fabricate it. Another way is through parasites. There are certain parasites in the game that can let you take one killing blow before they actually expire, which also acts kind of like an extra life. And finally, there's the Reconstructor, which is this big kind of like mold looking thingy that seems to have like the shape of one of the big xenomorphs. Well, if you go into one of these and pay the 6 ether cost, which is pretty high, it's going to give you kind of like a restoration point that if you die, you're going to be brought back right to it, but you also get to keep all of the items that you had upon you. And the same goes with the other ones, but you get to be resurrected where you died instead of back at a different place. Moving on to number 5, let's talk about proficiency and the best weapons. Now, proficiency is the white bar right beneath your HP bar. This determines the level of the weapons that you can find, as in the higher your proficiency, the higher the level of the weapon that you're going to find, but also the higher the stats and capabilities and traits. Naturally, this levels up as you kill enemies. I believe that for the first level of proficiency, you need to kill about 15 enemies, but there's other ways in which you can increase that. The final one is through something called weapon calibrators, which can be found in different rarities, but for the most part they will give you a varying amount of proficiency when you pick them up. You can see them with the color purple on the ground from far away, but if you look on the map, they actually appear with a blue triangle, so be mindful of that because they are a little bit different over there. But the more level you have, the more stats you get, the better stats and the better traits on these weapons, so it is really worth it. Moving on to number 6, let's also talk about secrets and other cool stuff you can explore in this game for some really awesome rewards, starting things off with the secret underground caves and rooms that will give you a number of rewards. When you go out exploring in the game, you might stumble upon one of these glowing yellow orbs on the ground. If you approach them, your ground is actually going to collapse beneath you, which is going to make you fall into one of these rooms. Now, there's a number of these rooms that exist in the game, but just covering a few, you can find anything from weapon chest rooms that will give you access to multiple chests with really awesome weapons you can get, obolite rooms which have a lot of these obolites on the ground, and you have a limited time to actually collect these, so as soon as you drop, you have to collect them as fast as possible, otherwise they despawn. But then there's also the boss rooms where you encounter a really tough enemy that you have to take down, and as a result you will be rewarded either a weapon, an upgrade, or some really good consumable that will help you in your journey. These are the more threatening ones, but the rest are pretty much combat free. This also brings us to number 7, and there's a second type of combat room in the game. When you go in the world and check out the minimap, you will notice that there are certain rooms with a yellow icon or even a red icon and a star over it. Now these are what I call combat rooms. Essentially, they provide you with a challenge to fight a number of enemy waves that are increasingly more difficult, but they also give you the most amount of upgrades and rewards in the game. So just a couple of examples that I have found. It seems that a lot of these rooms provide a lot of that resin that you can use to quickly increase your max HP. There's also a ton of those calibrators for the weapons and other upgrades on the ground, of course on top of the enemies that are pretty tough, but if you take them down, they also drop some really awesome resources that you can further use. Once you're finished with the room, it's going to open up a secret door that's going to provide further artifacts, weapons, and in most of the situations also ether. That is another resource that is very useful, so definitely something you can check out, but make sure you are prepared for them in the first place. The final secret rooms are going to be these ones locked behind these gates. Essentially, they can also hold weapon chests, artifacts or other types of consumables behind them, and the catch is that you only need to find their secret button that is hidden usually right next to them. So this can be like behind one of these statues, at the top of a ceiling, or next to a wall. So pay attention to these glowing buttons, because once you shoot them, it's going to open up the door and give you access to the goodies behind them. There's many other types of secrets in the game that I didn't have time to cover. I will cover them in future videos. So if you want to stay up to date with that and everything else Returnal related, definitely make sure you subscribe and activate that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next one.